Parshat Bo A. This is a shir adapted from the shiurim of Mori v'Rebbe Moran Hagoyin Reb Henach Leibowitz Zechet Tzadik Livracha. To see this shir in its written form, please refer to the Yeshiva Keseh Torah website, yeshivakesetorah.org. The title of this shmuz, of this shir, is A Forgotten Obligation. We must be mentchen and behave with Derech Eretz. The psukim relate that Moshe and Aaron came to warn Paro about the oncoming plague of locusts, and then left. Paro's servants became nervous and frightened over Moshe's ominous warning. They then pressured Paro to call back Moshe and Aaron for further negotiations. Paro sent a messenger to invite Moshe and Aaron back. After these negotiations stalemated, Moshe and Aaron did not leave of their own accord, but tarried in Paro's presence until Paro had them driven out forcefully. This seems to be the way the Rivah understands these psukim. The Rivah was one of the Balei Tosfos, a Rishon, a Talmud of Rashi. The Rivah asks a question. Why here, pertaining to the plague of locusts, Arba, did Moshe and Aaron tarry in Paro's presence until he had them driven out from before him? Whereas during the other plagues, Moshe and Aaron issued their warnings of the oncoming plagues and quickly turned and left Paro's presence. That is the question of the Rivah. Why were they tarrying in Paro's presence? The Rivah answers that during all the other plagues, Moshe and Aaron entered of their own accord, and therefore took leave by themselves. Whereas during this plague of locusts, Paro extended to Moshe and Aaron a royal invitation and even sent a messenger to escort them. It would therefore not be respectful and would constitute a lack of Derech Eretz for them to leave without Paro's permission. Thus, according to the Rivah, since Moshe and Aaron came for the second round of negotiations to Paro by invitation, it would not be polite for them to leave without Paro's express permission. Since this permission to leave was not forthcoming, they had no choice but to tarry there and wait until Paro would have them driven out. And the question is, Moshe and Aaron's behavior seemed to be rather bizarre. Surely Moshe and Aaron foresaw what could be the consequence of their actions, as indeed did occur tarrying and waiting to be driven out by Pharaoh. They would be leaving themselves wide open to terrible embarrassment and humiliation. Not only would their own personal dignity be at stake, but since they were the messengers of Hashem, the honor of the Almighty Himself would be threatened. This would result in a terrible Chilul Hashem, a desecration of Hashem's holy name. If so, would it be worthwhile for Moshe and Aaron to allow Hashem's honor as well as their own personal honor to be so disgraced? Would it not be more worthwhile for them to avoid this terrible oncoming Chilul Hashem by breaching the Derech Eretz and walking out on Parai without his permission, thus avoiding placing themselves in such a humiliating situation? It seems from here that there would be no greater Chilul Hashem than for Moshe and Aaron, the messengers of Hashem, to fail to behave as mentchen and Balei Derech Eretz. If Moshe and Aaron would rather tarry and wait to be driven out by Parai, then this would be less of a Chilul Hashem than walking out of their own accord and not behaving with Derech Eretz. Avoiding physical expulsion by violating the Derech Eretz, walking out on Parai without his permission, would in fact be committing a greater Chilul Hashem. May we realize the tremendous importance and obligation of behaving with Derech Eretz. There are people who mistakenly think that behaving with proper Derech Eretz is not a halacha and not necessarily essential or fundamental in our lives. It is something that can be taken lightly. How untrue this is. Moshe and Aaron chose to suffer embarrassment and degradation of their personal honor and the honor of Hashem Himself, rather than commit a severe transgression of acting without Derech Eretz. May we realize that we all have that distinct privilege of being part of the legion of the King, and that our personal conduct of being Balei Derech Eretz, polite, courteous, and respectful, will not only enhance our own honor, but also the honor of Hashem Himself. B'nai Torah who are perceived to some extent as messengers of Hashem have a particular obligation to acquire these traits. May we be zeicher to develop our character traits and thereby fulfill this sacred obligation of being Balei Derech Eretz, and thus be worthy of being part of a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Amen. We should be zeicher to this. Amen v'amen.